Hello everyone, this is Dr. N. Nagajodi, Assistant Professor of English from Sri Kalishwari College, Sivagasi. In this video lecture, let's explore how John Fowles, the French lieutenant woman, exemplifies the key features of postmodern fiction. Imagine that you're reading a novel. But suddenly, right in the middle of the book, the author steps into the story and says, I'm writing this novel. I can change the ending if I want to. Then, instead of giving you one clear ending, the author gives you multiple different endings. Would you still call it a traditional novel? Certainly not. The novel challenges the traditional storytelling, breaks literary rules. Because of these unique features, the French lieutenant's woman is considered one of the finest examples of postmodern fiction in English literature. Let's first discuss what is postmodernism. To understand postmodernism, we must look at what came before it. For a long time, people trusted big ideas such as religion, science, reason, and progress. They believed these ideas would solve human problems and make the world a better place. However, the 20th century saw terrible events such as the First World War, the Second World War, economic crisis, and social conflicts. These events made many people question the old beliefs. This realized they realized that progress and technology do not always bring peace and happiness. As a result, a new way of thinking called postmodernism developed after World War II. Postmodernism argued that there is no single truth that everyone must accept. Different people see and understand reality in different ways. Life is often uncertain, complex, and sometimes confusing. In simple words, postmodernism teaches us not to accept one idea as the only truth. Instead, it encourages us to look at different viewpoints and possibilities. This new way of thinking influenced literature and led to the rise of postmodern fiction. What is postmodern fiction and what is traditional fiction? Traditional novels usually follow a predictable pattern, perhaps. They have a clear beginning, middle, and end, a reliable narrator, and a fixed message, as you know. Postmodern novels completely challenge these rules. Instead of keeping the reader passive, a postmodern novel forces the reader to become an active participant, almost like solving a puzzle with a lot of multiple or ambiguous endings. The author intrudes within the novel and it has a lot of open interpretation with no fixed meaning and lot of fragmentation also. Let's move on to the plot summary of the novel. The novel is set in the 1860s in a small traditional coastal town in England called Lyme Regis. The protagonist meet the protagonists Charles Smithson, Sarah Woodruff, and Ernestina Freeman. Let's see the plot summary. The male protagonist, Charles Smithson, he is a wealthy, highly educated gentleman who considers himself a modern scientific man who agrees with Charles Darwin's theories of evolution. Charles was visiting the town with his young, rich conventional fiancée, Ernestina Freeman. One day, walking near the sea, Charles notices a mysterious woman dressed in black staring out at the ocean. That woman is Sarah Woodruff. The local townspeople call her by cruel nicknames such as prostitute, the French lieutenant's woman. They believe she had a scandalous affair with a shipwrecked French naval officer who actually abandoned her, and they think she is half mad with grief, waiting for him to return. Charles becomes deeply fascinated by Sarah. At first, he tells himself he just wants to help her as a matter of charity, but he started meeting her secretly in the woods. However, as they spend more time together, Charles realizes that Sarah is incredibly intelligent and independent than that of his fiancée. Soon, his sympathy turns into intense romantic attraction. This relationship throws Charles into a massive personal crisis. He's caught between his social duty of marrying the respectable Ernestina and his personal desire of being with the mysterious woman, Sarah. Eventually, Charles decides to follow his heart. He breaks off his engagement with Ernestina, which it destroys his social reputation and his wealth. He goes to find Sarah to build a life with her, but he discovers a shocking twist. Sarah has tricked him about her past. She was actually a virgin all along, and now she has completely vanished. Charles spends the next 2 years traveling across Europe and America trying to find her. When he finally tracks her down in London, she is living an entirely independent life. It is at this point the novel breaks away from the traditional storytelling and offers us multiple conflicting endings as the typical postmodern novel. Now, let's connect the dots. Let's look at the key characteristics of postmodern fiction and see how John Fowles uses them in his novel The French Lieutenant's Woman. The first technique is metafiction. Metafiction is when a novel openly acknowledges that it is a work of fiction. It breaks the illusion and reminds readers they are reading a constructed story. In a traditional Victorian novel, the author stays invisible behind the scenes. But in this novel, in chapter 13, John Fowles literally stops the plot and says to the reader, the story I am telling is all an imagination. These characters do not exist. I am just a novelist sitting at a desk typing. By doing this, Fowles breaks the fourth wall. He reminds us that we are reading a constructed piece of art, not a real life. This self awareness is the ultimate postmodern trademark of being a metafiction. Traditional novels usually end with one clear and closing conclusion, as we all know. But postmodern novels reject this because they believe life doesn't have one clear conclusion. Fowles offer three different endings to this novel. Ending one is, of course, the false ending, we could say. It happens in chapter 44. The narrator gives a traditional Victorian ending where Charles marries Ernestina and they live a conventional, boring life. But then the author reveals this was just a thought experiment and rewinds the clock. Ending 2 is perhaps romantic. Charles finds Sarah in London, discovers they have a child together, and they embrace in a happy romantic reunion. Ending 3 is perhaps the typical postmodern ending, we could say. Sarah refuses to give up her freedom for marriage. Charles leaves her house alone, heartbroken but stronger, realizing he must now discover his own identity without relying on a woman. By refusing to tell us which ending is the real one, Fowles forces us to accept the postmodern criteria that life has no real button, there is no absolute truth, and romance is not the answer to everything, and freedom is there over comfort. The next thing postmodern technique is fragmentation and interruption. Instead of telling a smooth, continuous story from start to finish, John Fowles constantly interrupts the plot. At most important moments in the novel, John Fowles passes the plot and discusses topics such as Victorian society, religion, social class, prostitution, and Charles Darwin's theories. Perhaps these interruptions break the flow of the story and create a fragmented narrative. This fragmented structure is a key feature of postmodern fiction because it challenges traditional storytelling and makes readers active participants in the reading process. Next comes intertextuality. Intertextuality is a literary technique in which a text refers to, borrows from, or connects with other texts. In French Lieutenant's Woman, John Fowles uses this intertextuality by beginning many chapters with epigraphs, short quotations taken from other works. Fowles quotes from Victorian writers and thinkers such as Alfred Lord Tennyson, Thomas Hardy, Charles Darwin, and Karl Marx. This blending of differing texts and viewpoints is a key feature of postmodernism, we could say. Another important feature of postmodern fiction is perhaps pastiche. Do you know what is pastiche? In French Lieutenant's Woman, John Fowle imitates the style of a traditional novel, but Sarah Woodruff is not a helpless woman. The settings, language, characters, and social concerns all resembles a 19th century Victorian romance, perhaps. However, Fowles does not simply copy the Victorian style. For example, Sarah Woodruff is not a helpless woman, as that of a Victorian woman protagonist. She is independent. Thus, Fowles uses irony to overturn traditional Victorian expectation by imitating Victorian fiction while simultaneously challenging its convention. He creates a postmodern parody or pastiche. Moreover, in French Lieutenant's Woman, John Fowles rejects the grand narratives of Victorian society such as religion, social class, morality, and science, which claim to provide clear answers about human life. So, to conclude, the French lieutenant's woman is an excellent example of postmodern fiction, we could say. Life does not provide neat answers. It's up to write our own endings. Thank you for listening.